Hi, Rosie.
Hello, Cindy.
So good to see you again. It's been such a long time, and I've been feeling this coming on for quite some time, and it feels perfect timing. You're about ready to launch a course that I'm very attracted to. Those of you who are just meeting Rosie for the first time, Rosie's created many things, one of them being a deck of cards, a coloring book, a workbook, a, a, a book, right? Around something known as the Wisdom Keepers. This is the box for the Oracle cards, and she has created artwork for 64 wisdom keepers that correlate to the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching and also other systems that we've studied, human design and gene keys, but they actually stand on their own as well. So I'd love to have you come forward and talk a little bit about this, this amazing talent you have for drawing, and also connecting us to the internal wisdom, which is so important right now.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Cindy. I'm a huge fan of yours. So I'm very honored to be here with you today. And wow, it's funny because I haven't really identified as an artist in my life. I've always liked to create art, but I've been more an expressive artist, sort of like allowing whatever's happening on the inside to come out through modalities that might be associated with artistic modalities. And also, I think it's kind of like, I don't know if you ever do this, but like think about like what's on the top and what's on the bottom. Like, am I fundamentally an artist who sometimes serves through the art, or am I fundamentally someone who's here to be of service, and sometimes I use art in order to do that? And I kind of see myself as the latter. So it's interesting that you say that about me, which I really appreciate. And I guess I can say that the reason why I even did this, what now has become an oracle deck or a project, or the kind of the inspiration behind a lot of different projects, is because I was really needing some self-care time. I had no agenda. There was no ambition. There was no sense that I was doing something that was going to be used by anybody else. So it was kind of interesting for me, like that I had been like working very hard in my private practice as a counselor, as an expressive arts drama therapist, and also, using the gene keys in my counseling, human design in my counseling. And I was feeling overwhelmed by what was happening in the world, and like there was very little space for my own inner life. And so it was actually my husband and daughter who said, Rosie, you have got to do something for yourself. What can you do that would be easy and nourishing and nurturing? And they took me to an art store and they said, what if you just doodle a little bit, And so they got me this, this pad of paper and a black marker, and I just started doodling. So it was really like, it was an act of self-care that gave birth to this whole thing. So I was doodling. And then the next thing I know, I thought, well, what if I like created like the outline of a face and doodled inside of it? And that first face that came to me, which was the 22 inside of the deck, Grace, I felt so healed looking into her eyes. Like I felt like she had arrived at a place that I longed to be at, of this kind of very relaxed, loving, open, wise state. Are you trying to find her?
I'm not going to be able to find it, but I want to show at least. I know there's a light reflecting, but just look at the detail on this beautiful image. And just, I wrote in my newsletter today, I write a newsletter every week, that we have a new granddaughter. And so I say, just looking at her picture changes my energy and lifts my energy. And that's what all of these cards, every single one, your talent for creating eyes and depth and light in eyes just through black and white has always impressed me. And
Thank
Just
you.
the depth of calmness and, you know, presence in every single one of these. And
Mm,
all your art is very grounding. So I want to thank you for that. And I think that if when you begin to talk about your program and
mm,
helping people connect with the inner wisdom keepers that live within them, I think that's the main thing we want to mention, is that these wisdom keepers aren't out there, they're inside of us. And that when we start an exploration of creating a rich inner life and communicating with these different archetypes that are available to support us in our creativity and bringing our creativity to the world, that we have to trust ourselves to let go of one way of being just for the time being, to tune into a sensitivity of another way of listening.
mm,
You've been so great at helping people hold space for that in all the work that you do and all the ways that you um, partner with people and creativity as a someone who supports and champions creative expression. So your feminine energy too is just, everybody feels so safe with you, that I think that that's the big piece, the big, you know, number one on checklist. Like, you need to feel safe and held with somebody who's taking you into a kind of a new space that could be disorienting.
mm.
So maybe you should talk a little bit about that, so I'm not making people afraid. Like, tell them exactly what you're going to offer.
Oh, okay, the course. Okay, oh my God, there's so many things that you said I could respond to. Okay, so, well, maybe I can just say a little bit about this safety thing. I think maybe one reason why I have the effect of making people feel safe is because I know what it feels like to not feel safe. um, and also something else I wanted to say about the wisdom keepers, which I think you were touching on, which is important, is that on the one hand, it's a paradox, as most things are. Like, on the one hand, it's an invitation to awaken the inner wisdom keeper inside of all of us. And that while there are 64 of these, all representing different archetypes, and they look like they're different people, and each of them have different stories and all that kind of stuff, they all live inside of us. And then on the other hand, there is something that happens in the magic of relationship. And this is something that you and I were talking about before we started talking with the recording button going, that allows for this, for inspiration, for transformation to happen. So that if we're too identified with a part to the point where we don't even know that it exists inside of us, sometimes it's nice to externalize it temporarily so that we can start to engage with it and converse with it and be asked questions by it and to ask questions ourselves. And so on the one hand, the wisdom keepers all live inside of us. And on the other hand, I like to see them as kind of wonderfully loving, supportive beings who've been through it, like who've really suffered. Each of them has suffered in their own way and came to a place of open-heartedness and compassion and groundedness that are here for us to interact with, so that we can discover that they're actually living inside of us. So it's a little bit of both, right? There's sort of a relational component, and then there's also the birth of the relationship within us.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. I think too, what feels really helpful in the bridge that you're creating is that those of us who have been interested in the I Ching and the hexagrams, is that it's hard to relate, you know, how we as humans anthropomorphize everything, right? We need to have something that's approachable, that's relatable. But once you get into the energy of these wisdom keepers, you know, there's this wormhole into all the wisdom that comes from the mystical origins of these hexagrams and how it's connected to uh, unique ways that get expressed through our DNA, not the genetics we think of hair color and stuff, but genetics of, could we say, consciousness, or um,
Mm.
because that's really what we're watching, I feel, unfold in the world is the awake, not the awakening of consciousness. Consciousness is already awake, but it's the instrument of the individual. Like my favorite quote, one of my favorite quotes by David Bohm is, consciousness is seeking a form that allows its fullest expression. And I
Mm,
feel like that's what these wisdom keepers help us see, is where we block that, where the things we believe or continue to act out unconsciously block the consciousness, the expansion of consciousness that's attempting to um, broaden our perspective.
mm, beautiful. Yeah. And I'm just thinking about like one of my intentions once I decided to take this self-care practice and turn it into something that could be of service to other people, like what was an intention behind it. And I think it was to create simple, relatable, relational portals into these various archetypes to really begin transformative, contemplative, but even beyond that, experiences for people in a way that was just very easy. You know, where you don't have to learn a system, you don't have to like memorize a million numbers or this or that or the other thing. It, like taking it out of the head and into the heart, and making consciousness our own personal, unique relationship to the vast existence, you know, much more accessible to everybody.
Well, that's
And
a
yeah,
good point. It's a
yeah,
really good point because I didn't want to impose a limitation
yeah.
by connecting it to the I Ching, even though it's the 60, there's 64 hexagrams, 64 wisdom keepers. Anybody coming into the deck could just relate to these uniquely without connecting it to any other system, as you mentioned. So that's an important point. I mean, I've
Yeah.
just been, studying this for so many years that it's just automatic to connect it. But I see, yeah, what you're saying is just opening it to a whole nother level of freedom for someone coming in that's not already
Steeped. Yeah.
conditioned
Yeah.
by that
Well,
mind.
it can open people up to, so there are a lot of people who are already very, you know, working with the I Ching, working with the gene keys, working with human design, that use these as supplemental tools. And then there are people who know nothing about those things that use this just on its own. And then some people end up using the wisdom keepers as ways in, you know, because like if you look at, you know, the I Ching is it's kind of intense on its own, right? Or you know, not everybody has Cindy Silva's mind that can like grasp very complex topics in the way that you can. The Gene Keys is like a book. It's like this thick. It's like War and Peace. So this is kind of like a simple way in that can open up to those very deep and profound explorations for people as well. So it's like you know, it's flexible in that way.
Oh, and I love that because you mentioned the keys. It's a way in, and here's the back of the card. It's a beautiful dragonfly with a key, because and it can. Oh, you have a colored
This is
version.
Yes, I have the colored version, which is the one that's out now. You have the first edition black and white, and there are none of those left.
Oh,
So you got an old one.
I like them. But they're also, what I was pointing about with the key is the key can get you in and it
Mhm.
can get you out. So I love that someone like myself who, and many others probably listening, have been studying these systems. It's sometimes good to just shed everything you know or everything you think you know and enter it with innocence. And so
Mhm.
these wisdom keepers, how I hadn't seen this before, can be a way out, and just to make this connection with a wisdom keeper without all of the labels and keywords and associations
Mhm.
that the numbers have with the other systems. They can drop in, or we can fall open to insights from just making a connection with the softness of this beautiful image's aura, or even just the image on the third eye. You know, every third eye has a really unique image.
Mm.
And, you know, when you pull them randomly, it's not random. There's, you know, this idea that we always pick the perfect card at the right time to answer whatever question that we're, um, yeah, this brings something up that
Mhm.
oftentimes when I am feeling confused, or that pressure of confusion and doubt, these are, you know, terms we're used to, it's because there's something wanting to be known that's beyond my perceptual ability to receive it. And so this pressure and confusion, sometimes irritability comes in, and when I slow down and go into spaciousness and I create space, and I don't fight the pressure and doubt, but I see it as a invitation to get relaxed and create space. That
Mm.
thing that wants to be known drops in, and that pressure, everything's gone. So I see these, you know, confusion and things like that as an invitation to stretch my perception.
Mm.
And I feel like what you said about the way in, and the paradox about using the way in as a way out,
Mhm.
that these wisdom keepers can help us stretch our perception to allow what's wanting to be known to drop in and be known from the subconscious to the conscious.
I love that. And I love that you're talking about confusion, which is connected to imagination. And that plays a very central role in the course that I'm about to teach, which is called the Wisdom Wheel of Integrity, where I'm going to be, this is actually my very first live class based totally on this deck.
Mhm.
And so it's a big stretch for me. And I'm really excited about it. And it was kind of born out of my feeling a great deal of confusion about both everything happening in the world. Like the more rabbit holes I went down, the more confused I got about what is actually happening. What is the truth? What source can I go to find out what's happening? And also confusion around what's my right role. Like what is the genuine, unique, authentic, empowered, and yet self-loving response that this vehicle here is meant to have in relation to everything going on around me. And so I did my own work with the Wisdom Keepers, where I created a council of them to support me during these times. And what came out of that was this kind of understanding of this fine line, or this dance that I think we're all being asked to do one way or the other, in order to find that just right place for us to both relax and also to interface with the world. And so I can just like talk a little bit about the four seats in the wheel, which I will be pulling in the course, like Wisdom Keepers for the collective in these seats. And then each person who participates will be choosing a Wisdom Keeper for their own personal wisdom wheel of integrity. I'm talking because this is what it's all about. It's all about like how to be in our center, in our integrity, honoring the inner wisdom resources that we have inside of us. And at the same time, honor the fact that we were each born, what did you say? You said something so good, like with the design and the direction. What did you say about that?
Yeah, we're born with a specific talent. We're gifted in a certain direction, and we're aimed when we come in. We're not a
Yeah.
blank slate. That's our design, you know, whether it's astrology or numerology or
Yeah.
design or gene keys, there's, or our genetics. It's like we have a certain, our body, mind is an instrument for interfacing with reality that comes pre-wired,
Mm-hmm.
something specific.
Yes, exactly. So we have these gifts, we have our true nature, and then we're aimed. Like there is a certain role that we're meant to play. There's a way in which who we are is needed by the world around us. And sometimes in order to kind of really embody that, both the path but also the presence, we need to do this dance. And the way that I'm kind of articulating it is through like the balance of these, it's like meta archetypes in a way. And like one is loving kindness, because I found that there are a lot of people who think that integrity is just about having principles and living them out. But I know a lot of people who have wonderful principles, but they're not very nice. They're not nice to themselves, and they're not kind to other people. And then it doesn't matter how great our principles are. It doesn't matter how, defensible our values are if we don't know how to have kindness in our heart. And I think a lot of people too who are very kind to others and they're not kind to themselves. I've had that experience in my own life. That's been one of my patterns. So kindness, loving kindness is definitely has to go both ways. But if we're only practicing loving kindness and we don't have what's on the other side, which is self-respect, healthy self-respect, which is so connected to self-care, then we fall into the patterns of codependence, people pleasing, and we lose ourselves, right? So again, this is one of the dances between self-respect and self-care and loving kindness. And then the other two that I'm kind of, and what I wanted to say was that the confusion or creativity or the imagination is in the middle of this whole thing. Like, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the other two, like we have up here something I'm calling courageous self-trust. And for those people who know about human design or who've worked with, standing in their personal sovereignty and being willing to break through conditioning, layers and layers of conditioning in order to be true to the inner impulse, even though it's scary, even though the world doesn't understand it, even though our parents would disapprove, even though it might get us into trouble, even if the culture might cancel us, right? We still are able to follow that impulse, to follow that integrity impulse instinct that comes from within us. That's the courageous self-trust. But it needs to be balanced out by the other piece, which I'm calling reverent surrender. Because if all we're doing is imposing our goodwill on the world because we think we know what the world needs, and really I'm talking about sacred activism here, and we don't have a deeper trust in the divine intelligence of the universe, that everything is unfolding in ways that our little pea brains could never possibly understand the mystery and beauty of. Like if we can't keep that perspective as well, then too much ego starts to take over this courageous self-trust thing, and it becomes like an imposing of our will on the universe. And so we need all of these things. We need to be kind, and we need to be self-respecting, and we need to be courageous and speak truth, but we also need to be able to surrender with reverence to the beauty that's unfolding and to the fact that there's some evolutionary dance that's happening that's so much bigger and deeper than any of us could possibly comprehend. Then we start to come into our integrity. And then in the middle, we have, for me, like it's a little bit what you were talking about before in terms of like being willing to listen, being in the dance, being a creative partner with each of these pieces that is so necessary, because otherwise we get a little too rigid in any of those places. And when I think about what's happening in the world right now, God, do we need to be creative and flexible and adaptable and constantly shifting all the time in order to find a right response to each moment, because every moment is going to ask something very different of us. Things are changing at a rapid pace. Mm-hmm. And so if we don't cultivate that love of creativity and that willingness to like throw ourselves into the unknown or that trust, that you were talking about with the nymph of like being willing to emerge from the depths of the water and trust that our wings are gonna unfold and help us fly, then we're in trouble, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That keeps reminding me of something that I watched unfold in my own life, that any kind of change and growth requires betrayal, and we don't like that word, and we're uncomfortable with it because it brings up guilt. But anytime I've ever gone through a shift where I've had to let go of one way of being or an identity or role. I've had to betray myself and certain relationships that were attached to that role and way of being in order to free myself up and my energy up to enter a new role, enter a new position. And I
Hmm.
think it really strikes a tribal chord in us when we betray, even though betrayal is necessary for growth. Um, the guilt is so strong that it's easy to snap back into the old role, the old way.
Mhm.
I remember, I think it was with Oprah trying to, start a girls' school in Africa, and the girls would start to do really well, and then the the tribal strength and bond of the community was like, who do you think you are? Like, you think you're better than us? And it really created such a challenge. I don't know that they ever overcame it, to be honest.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Um, I hope they have, honestly. I don't know, but I remember hearing that story, and it's like the story of the crabs in the bucket. Have you heard that?
No, tell me.
Kind of like the tall poppy. They always chop down the tall poppy, but the
Yes.
crabs in the bucket, if you put a bunch of crabs in the bucket, I live on the coast by the ocean, but so I can talk about crabs in buckets. I see them a lot. And they'll climb up on top of each other, right? And then one will get a hold of the lip of the bucket and start to pull itself out, and the other ones will reach up and pull it down. And so I feel like we're going through in our culture is we're so tribal. Like,
Mhm.
we have to, if somebody believes something different than us, they're a threat, and we have to destroy. Like, I'm not speaking about everyone, but we see that manifestation right now as something that's getting, hopefully, cleansed by coming into awareness and being exposed. Um, and we all have tribal wiring in us. As long as we're in human bodies, we're creatures, we want the security of the tribe. So to leave a tribe, whether they're healthy for us or not, is a scary thing. And to cut those bonds with even the subtlest, relationships of the parts of ourself that we've been loyal to.
Yeah.
And so, what I really love about what you're presenting is that we're starting to build new bonds of loyalty and relationship with these other healthy aspects
Mm.
of us. And when we follow our curiosity, this was Elizabeth Gilbert wrote about this. She said she used to tell people, find your purpose, find your purpose.
Mhm.
And then in her book, Big Magic, she wrote how she realized how cruel that was to some people. Not everybody can do it that way. Like, she's able to know she's a writer. She said other people have to go, like the abstract circuitry, you have to go trial and error, find this, do a lot of things, and then find that common thread. So now she tells her clients or students or whoever seeking creative guidance to follow your curiosity,
Mhm.
and it will lead you to your purpose. And so, why I share that is that if you're curious at all about any kind of divination cards, it's because you're aimed in that direction towards the subtle um, domains and dimensions of what's wanting to be known.
Mm.
And I find the people that are sensitives and the people that can quote unquote read the future, they're not reading the future, they're reading the subtle energy that's out on the periphery that hasn't yet become physical. So it's not future, it's present, it's just in a very subtle form.
Mm.
So I feel like by diving into this wisdom wheel of integrity, it's about going to the edge of the field and dropping a line and waiting for a bite, and then
Mhm.
reeling it in and bringing it to the community and helping us all sort of understand through everybody's um, catch the bigger picture of what's wanting to be known, because no single person is going to bring it through.
That's so true. We need each other right now. You know, we need all of us to be coming into our integrity, cultivating our intuitive capacities, bringing in our own counsels, sharing our counsels with each other. You know, we can't do this alone. It's the end of that, you know, era of looking for the guru out there, like that one person who's figured it out, or wait for that political party to fix it and save us all. It's like that's over. You know, we need to be, well, whatever, so many cliches that one could say, but to be the change, you know, we need to embody the change.
And to think differently, right? Because we have to think differently, like not try to solve the problem from the problem, right? Like to go to another field. Like my friend who's a musician, she said, I went to the river today and I sat there and I caught a song. Because it's in the noosphere, right?
Like, yeah, totally.
And she got quiet in the right place at the right time and she caught a song. Wrote it down.
I love it. I totally love it. You know, I started just recently taking a class called Singing to the Land, taught by a woman named Shay Nichols. She's this amazing improvisational nature singer. And for me, this is a very big personal stretch, right? This is something that I feel deeply called to unleash my sort of shamanic, wild, crazy, untamable voice. and again, it's a betrayal. Like to really do that is a betrayal of the nice, diplomatic listener therapist type who always kind of tried to, you know, moderate my response based on who I was with and what they could handle and what would be useful to them. And so like to really, you know, really bring out this wild side of myself through my voice does feel like a healthy betrayal of another part of me that was both full of gift and shadow, right? There was a survival strategy in there, but I also cultivated a lot of different capacities, which I don't regret. But if I lived only in that nymph water of the therapist, counselor, diplomatic use of voice person, I would be betraying this other part that wants to be flying free. You know, and I feel that a lot. It was interesting in our conversation before, you shared something to me about how sometimes we do things that are prophetic, and that there's a lot of Southwestern energy, you were saying, inside of the artistry of the wisdom keepers. And then I ended up moving from California to the Southwest. So I'm now living in New Mexico, which I would have never dreamed of, ever, ever, ever. And the other thing I'm doing is I'm working with Richard Rudd on the Dream Arc project, which is an aspect of this transmission called the Gene Keys that's taking these 64 hexagrams or 64 keys or archetypes and exploring them through the world of animal totems. And so again, like when I first came to Santa Fe or Albuquerque airport, and I walked into the airport and I looked around me and there were animal totems everywhere. And I just burst into tears. Like I burst into tears because, like you were saying, like none of this was planned, but I'm being called, or I'm aimed in a direction. And I've never been a planner. I had no idea what my purpose is if someone was, other than maybe to support people in trusting the natural unfoldment that comes out of our curiosity, or what we're drawn to, or what brings life to us, or what feels true. So I get so happy when I experience these serendipitous moments. And actually, I wrote a book many years ago, maybe it started in '93, called A Tale of Serendipity, which is all about animals, right? It's about seals and dolphins and whales. And
I remember that.
You remember that? Yeah. And again, would I have known then that I would be doing the Dream Arc?
It's called The Seven Seals.
Yeah, it's a story about 7 seals. And this is way before I knew. I mean, I don't even think Richard knew about the Gene Keys at that point. So there's something exciting too about like trusting in the magic of our life. And sometimes it's obvious. Most of the time it isn't. Most of the time it's little tiny, subtle micro movements that kind of take us in that direction we're meant to go. And so for me, like having a council of wisdom keepers that keep me like trusting the signs, trusting the internal signs, and trusting the attractions and moving towards them, even if it's scary, even if it means there's a betrayal, even if it means inner or outer, even if it means nobody will understand what I'm doing and I have no idea how to talk about what I'm doing at dinner parties, and I usually don't. But doing it anyway, like this is what I really want to encourage in all of us. And sometimes it looks impressive and it's on a screen, and sometimes it takes me to sing to a tree, like nobody knows about it but the tree, and I'm kind of hoping more and more of my life will look like that.
It will.
More of, yeah. So
it will. Now you'll be
yeah.
one of my elder women mystics that I'll interview in my series.
Oh,
And we'll be the same age.
we'll be the same age with the white hair. Oh my God. Ugh.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up about the dream arc, because, you're really, there's a pattern unfolding here, right? For you with archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
And you're bridging the subconscious realm with the conscious, like, where you went as a therapist working one-on-one with people, and that was too small because you're meant to reach more people, so you had to betray that to expand into, now you're working with a community of people. I mean, I'm sure people from all over the world will be participating in this. And how rich is that to be part of a community around the world that is doing this together, speaking different languages and showing up with different skin tones and hair and ages, and just the diversity just gives me the chills. But now you've been invited in, like, because you said yes to the betrayal and you said yes to the expansion. Now you're getting recognized, for a portal through which the subconscious can be made known to the conscious. So you're an instrument that's available to these totems, these I think they're reptiles, mammals, and birds, right? In the dream arc?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. So
insect.
for each of the hexagrams, you have the underworld creatures, which includes reptiles, but it's also fish and it's insects, snakes. Yeah. Well, that's reptiles, whatever. And then yes, mammals are the middle world, and then the upper world are the birds, the vision keys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you see the pattern that I see? Do you see what I'm trying to say? How when you took the pen to paper, you started doodling
Yeah.
and bringing forward these structures, like we talk about structure as a limitation, but it's also, without structure, there's no magic,
Yeah.
because the yin is the structure for the yang to create through. And so archetypes, think about the word archetype, architecture, arc, like a bridge.
Yes.
It's not about, it's so funny because I just talked about this, and we were doing some reverse abdominal breathing in my yoga class that I taught this morning, and we were talking about where we are sculpting space in the body. We're an architect of energy, sculpting space in the body. And architects, they might build buildings, but what they're really building is the space inside, and how that space is going to be used, how the energy is going to flow. And so when you're bringing through the artwork for these archetypes, you're putting the structure together as a doorway, an entry point into a space that has a particular quality that can bring out that quality inside of us that's wanting to be met, to be acknowledged, to be given access to. expression to the conscious, to the bridging from the subconscious to the conscious. So I just want to acknowledge you for being acknowledged by the universe as an instrument through which these subconscious archetypes, because I told you in the conversation before we started recording how I felt like this time we're in is a changing of the gods.
Mhm.
And you know, the gods of we could call them money and fame and all these things we've been conditioned to believe are superior, are, we'll really see that they're the inferior forces, and that the superior forces that are, um, things aren't good or bad or better or worse. Everything has its place in existence, but certain times and periods in life call for different integrous
Mhm.
instruments. So I just want to acknowledge that I feel like you're being acknowledged as a instrument of integrity, and to be the pen for the dream arc and the wisdom keepers is not lost on me. And I hope everyone listening can also see that and see the value of this important role that you're playing at this time. There's no accident that this is happening now.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I love that because, you know, as an expressive arts or drama therapist, like it's always about like creating the structures that will allow for as much freedom to come through, right? So like even if you're going to do like improv or something, you say, okay, so you have a group of people on a stage and you say, okay, so you're in a city and you know you're in New York and one of you someone's about to you're applying for a job and I don't know, like they'll give you like 3 little structures and then out of that like this whole scene can emerge.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that, and I'm having a little trouble like articulating this, but in a way I feel like I've always been doing that, like creating conditions for people to get in touch with their own creative impulses so that they can express it in the way that only they can possibly express it. Um, but one thing that I hadn't been able to do before, I think, was while I was doing that, be in my expression. Do you know what I'm saying? Like my expression was to create the conditions for other people's creative expression. But I think maybe that's my purpose, if I had to kind of define it, is to do that while being in my full expression. So to receive this acknowledgement from you really makes me happy because like I've found some way to both be artist and you know, or creatrix and facilitator of creativity and authentic self-expression at the same time. Like that's when I know I've reached my nirvana. And that's what I want for other people as well. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to create a bunch of mini Rosies. Like that would be horrible. I would really feel sorry for anybody who tried to do this.
Right.
I want people to be, you know, fully who they are. And so to give them tools that help them drop into their wisdom, find their right self-expression. That makes me really happy while I'm actually expressing myself. You
Yeah.
know,
Well,
so
I don't see that you could separate them, to be honest. How could they be
yeah.
separate?
Ah,
Only from your perspective, like the way you see it, it could
yeah,
feel separate, but there's no way to separate that.
that's true. That's true. But I think I'm just taking into I'm thinking about my own conditioning growing up and how much it's taken for me to get to a place where I actually allow myself to be more fully expressed while I'm supporting other people. Of course, there was always a creative component to what I was doing as a therapist or a counselor or facilitator, but there was also a holding back component, you know, always placing the other person's unfoldment over my own in some
But
way. And I know
I think that's still part of your creativity, because there's an
yeah,
innate sense in us of how we need to do this in a way that we're not expanding too fast. We have to have that protection of, you know, we don't want to be overprotective, and obviously we can do that, and you know, not open like a rose, like we talked about. But I think it's like, I know I was looking at some videos of myself teaching, and I was like, oh, I could see my woundedness, and I was like, oh, I really need to correct that. I need to do something about that. And then I thought, no, something told me, no, that's part of who you are. Like, you know, I, it's part of the whole package, and it's part of what makes certain people comfortable and maybe other people uncomfortable, but that's not for me to be responsible for. I just have to show up authentically. And if and when I'm feeling vulnerable and expressing some of my wounds surface, that's part of the healing. That's part of the creativity emerging, and to not allow my editor to decide what's creative and what's not. It's all creativity.
Creativity, yes, it's true. That's very true. Beautiful. Thanks for that reminder.
Yeah, I guess I would want to just add, like, if you could see yourself the way others see you, they would, for myself, I'd say you've been doing this all along. But I can relate by being the observer in your own experience, because you are listening to the stories in your mind, and I'm not hearing them. I'm hearing my own.
Well, it's so true. Just remembering this conversation I had with my mom a long time ago when I had a phase where I was actually doing portraits of animals. This was out of many, I don't know, 30 years, 25, 30 years ago or something. And I remember my mom, I had done a portrait of a dog that had passed away, one of my cousins. And my cousin was just so happy, and she just felt really like connected to the spirit of this animal. And my mom's perspective was, isn't she being nice to you, Rosy, that she's, giving you this feedback, like that she would be so kind to support you in your artist, in your little artist project. And I think I'm moving away from that, like, to thinking that if you express yourself and someone, receives it, you owe them so much because they're being nice enough to, like, even take it seriously in any way, and that they're actually doing you a favor by wanting your art, to, like, coming to a place where I feel in my heart that when I express myself, it can be a gift. It can be a true gift for people, that they're not just doing me a favor when they buy the Wisdom Keepers Oracle deck because they want to support the starving artist, but because there is something intrinsically helpful to them that came through me. But I think that's a little bit what I'm talking about in terms of how far I've come. Also from a place of really thinking of art as only, or creativity as really a self-indulgent process that, only narcissists entertain. Like, if you're not really serving the world in a very obvious way, and if you're enjoying yourself too much, there's something wrong, right? To, like, really understanding that we really can't serve the world unless we're nurturing and nourishing ourselves in some very deep, essential way.
That's
and
yeah, important reminder.
What I was referring to.
I get it. I just wanted to
no, I get it too, and you're right.
Perspective on it a little bit. Yeah. Just have some fun.
It is important to recognize that it's all beautiful, and it's all learning, and it's all growth, and I wouldn't be without any of it. Like, and I love what you're saying too, like looking at an old video of yourself and, like, first having that moment of shame, and then, like, no, that's me. Like, it's the whole package. It's like, it's multidimensional, it's past, present, future, it all belongs. It's happy, sad, articulate, totally screw up moments. Like, that's like the juice and the wonder of life. That's what has to blossom, right? It's not some, like, perfection in the future that we're clinging to, right? And everything else has no value. So I totally appreciate what you're saying.
No. Yeah, and I think, with the interesting thing with the I feel like we've taken a quantum leap with this COVID, in terms of, we went from, I'm just going to put out random numbers here because I don't know them, but if I were to guess, we went from, like, 100,000 Zoom users to 1 million, within a week. That is a quantum leap. And now, with this idea of
Mm.
our awareness shifting as we evolve, that we're going to be experiencing uh, through another person's awareness. We're doing that right now. I am looking into I'm in your home, your space. We're looking into each other's, we're being more, there's this intimacy, and it, there's, I don't know, I don't think this conversation has enough time for where I want to go with this, but maybe we could do it at another time because it's really big and I don't want to go off topic because I want to come back to your offer, your program, and the book you wrote about walking a fine line was really another important thing I want to touch on. Um, and it's about integrity. So there's this other common thread with you about integrity. And if you want to say a few things about walking a fine line and, you know, there's reasons we do what we do. And you wrote that book at the time you did for a reason. And I wonder what that was, if you can remember.
Sure. And I'll try and simplify this. I was, I had already been through a more traditional education at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, studying psychology and social change. Then I went to Denmark. I was in my very early 20s, and I just opened up to the whole alternative, spiritual, new age, humanistic explorations, and did a million different workshops, and then eventually got very involved in a spiritual community and training program using the breath. It was sort of a breath worker related thing. And I learned so much. I felt so empowered and so free, and free from a lot of the kind of conditioning, academic conditioning I had grown up with. And it was a wonderful time in my life. And I bumped into some major shadows inside of the spiritual community that I was in that had to do with, sexual violation and misuses of power. And I went through a whole personal growth process as I got myself to be in a place where I could speak out about it. Like, because again, like as often happens in these communities, you get people playing many, many different roles, and your teacher is also your friend, and your friend is also your practice client, and then you're supervising people who, so there's so many multiple roles being played that it gets extremely confusing to know, what's appropriate, what isn't, what are boundaries that need to be held, what are boundaries that can be transcended or crossed. And I found myself in a place where I was being called to call back in some of that professionalism and boundary understanding and psychological concepts like code transference and like knowing the scope of one's practice and what isn't and what's okay to do under what conditions. And I ended up writing this book after having had that experience where I actually did eventually speak out, and it did not go well. And I kind of got kicked out of the tribe, right? I had to betray my teacher and my friends in order to be true to some kind of an inner integrity impulse inside of me that felt like, this is not okay. We need to look at this, not in order to blame anybody, but to take responsibility for all the roles that we played, including my own codependent role and my fear of speaking out that had been going on for some time. But it didn't go so well for the community, and I got kind of, kicked out. And so that's when I thought, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to rescue this community, but maybe I can be of service to other people who find themselves in a similar situation. And that was like the birth of this book. So this was in like the early 90s. And I talked about it, in the book, it's dealing with all kinds of common traps that people inside of alternative therapeutic healing contexts find themselves in, whether it has to do with like money and pressuring, or, boundary violations, or popularity contests, or there's so many things that happen in those situations.
Dysfunctional family.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And so bring in a little gestalt, bring in a little, so I just kind of, yeah, so I just kind of fleshed it all out, tell a bunch of stories from my own life, from other people's lives that I know, and I kind of updated it a couple of years ago and republished it because of everything that was happening in our culture in relation to the Me Too movement and a lot of the movies coming out about spiritual communities gone wrong. There's been so much of that happening recently, like so much of the underbelly of the collective is coming to the surface for us to look at it lovingly and find new ways to be together, to honor each other. And so so I updated it because it made me feel like, oh, maybe this is still relevant, you know, because of course I'm thinking, oh, well, I've gotten like, I don't know how many degrees since I wrote that book. I've had so many experiences. So can I really come out with that again? But I thought, you know what? There are enough people who are right in that spot that could use that invitation. And again, I am not one to say I know what's best, but I'm good at asking questions. I'm good at inviting in personal inquiries that help people feel into what is right for them, what they can do, what is beyond their scope, where do they need more support. And I actually created an online self-study course based on the book too. So that's at my school, yeah.
Oh, well, we were going to do an conversation about that book, and then you ended up moving, and we interrupted, and we were going to. So I'll go circle back around and refresh myself on that, and perhaps we'll do that still.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's just such a beautiful complementary piece that you're bringing into the wisdom wheel of integrity is the book Walking a Fine Line, and that you've learned the hard way how to hold space, like through trial and error, through direct experience, not just through theory and reading a book, but you've learned sort of how to expose the shadow before it becomes a bigger problem than it needs to be, but how to be aware of the potential of shadow interference. And so I feel like, you saying that this is your first online workshop with the deck, but I feel like all of the experiences you've had, the work you've done, the writing of this book has, it's been like you're a professional space holder just by having been a host for those experiences and writing that book.
Thank you. Yeah. And I hope I want to provide support for professional wisdom keepers. I want to provide empowerment for wisdom seekers, so they get more discerning as they feel into what teacher they want to be interacting with, or what community, or what kind of, like, how to work with bodies of knowledge, how to work with systems. Same with human design, for example, which has its shadow. Every system does, right? So like the more we can kind of be supported in keeping our eyes open and our hearts open and not be pressured into something that doesn't feel right, trust our own timing, our own pacing, I really want people, myself included, to get better and better at like noticing what actually is opening us and anchoring us and freeing us versus what is just another force from the outside, from the external realms, telling us who we should be, what we should do, what we should value, how we should act. It's like I want us all to become more free, and I'm working on this every day of my life.
Yeah, that's so yeah. Good. When you're speaking of that, it reminds me of something I wanted to share about the potential of working with this deck and your course is to notice which wisdom keepers you're attracted to, and that will give you an indication of the direction you're aimed.
Oh, I like that.
Because what we're attracted to is showing us where we're aimed.
Where we're aimed, that's right.
Yeah. So that's
yeah.
There was
I might add one thing to that. Can I add one little thing to that?
Of course, yes.
Because when we're looking at shadow, in a way, like what we're attracted to often points to like a light shadow inside of us that has been forbidden to us.
Mm-hmm.
Something that, like, if you think of someone that you really admire, like, oh my God, they're amazing, I could never be like that. You know, chances are they are pointing towards something inside of you that has been in some ways forbidden and is being called forth. And then on the other hand, I would also, like, if you were going to look at the deck and you like just only pick 2 cards for the rest of your life, I'd pick the one that attracts you and the one that repels you for some
Good
reason.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the one that's like, I don't know if that's really for me, because that also can point to something inside of you that for some reason has not been safe to embrace.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would encourage both of those explorations. And chances are your purpose, your light, where you're aimed will integrate both.
Mm-hmm.
They'll both be in there somehow. You don't want to push anything away, and you don't want to convince yourself that what you're attracted to has nothing to do with you. They both have everything to do with you.
Yeah, it's coming into your attention for a reason, right? I mean, anything that is coming into our attention, there's something there.
Yes, with charge. If it has a positive or negative charge,
Nice.
go for it.
Right. Well, I'll have to say, there's only a couple of people in the community I've met in person. You're one of them, and I was so delighted to meet you in person. You're just as warm and friendly in person as you are on screen. And when I met you, you were living in Berkeley, and you had just written the book that accompanied the deck, and I was complimenting you on what I felt was such a big risk in the way that you wrote the book, because I had picked a card and then I went to read in the book about it, and it was something that was completely different than I expected, and it really challenged me. And so I think that's just juicy, that when we're expecting something and something else shows up, then all our senses, I mean, we could reject it and say, well, that's not right. But like you said, there was a charge there. So it was really like, you wrote this book in a way I didn't expect, and it brought me to a question I was needing to ask that I wasn't able to come to on my own.
Oh, interesting.
So I want to thank you for all the risks you've taken to blossom. And will you say that quote for us? It's in your email, because I've known you for how many years?
Many.
And you've had the same quote in your email signature, and it so impresses me. And I look for it every time I get an email from you, because I love it.
Everything changes about me except that quote. Okay, so it's by Anais Nin, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. That's it.
Yeah. Can I share one more quote that I love?
Sure.
This is one of my other favorite quotes. Both of my quotes today are by physicists. So I love science. But these are mystical physicists. So David Bohm was the first one. And Carl Sagan said, somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known. And I love that quote, because I feel that that's been like in my field my whole life. Like the mystery and the wisdom, it's generous, it wants to be known, but it needs the right conditions sometimes, and those conditions require us to betray an old way of being and create a space for receptivity of more subtle forms. And the course you're offering is really feels in alignment with that quote. Somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known, and the wisdom keepers want to bring it.
Yes. And the mirror card.
Yes, the mirror card.
Yeah, because for those who don't know the deck has a 65th card, which is a mirror card because the end truth is that we are all the wisdom keepers that we're looking for. So you find your mirror card?
I have the mirror. I was the one I pulled, and I was like, I'm embarrassed to admit I haven't pulled the blue sleeve off the mirror card. It's actually, I'm going to do it right now.
Oh, good. I was just going to ask you, what's it going to take?
What's it going to take? A fingernail, and I don't really have a fingernail.
A fingernail and a readiness to acknowledge what a wisdom keeper is.
Yay. Everybody, look at the newest wisdom keeper.
Oh, oh. Oh, I hope they can, but they can't see themselves. Imagine that you're seeing yourselves.
Yeah, it's you, this bright, shiny white light. So thank you.
I'm honored that you unveiled your own beautiful wisdom keeper self to me and to all of us who are listening.
No, me too. What else do people need to know in order to connect with you, Rosy?
Well, just you can always go to my website, which is wisdomkeepers.net, not .com, but .net, and you can find just everything there. You know, anything that I've created, you'll find in the shop, and I think on the homepage it tells you how to get to the course if you're interested in learning more about it. And there's just a ton of stuff there. Too much probably, but you can learn anything you want and more.
Okay. And this course starts when?
Oh yes, it starts October 8th and it goes through December 13th. It's 10 sessions. The first one is 2 hours and the rest are 1.5 hour long. They will be interactive, which is really important to me, especially during these Zoom times. I think a lot of us, you know, so it'll combine teaching, but also exploring together and getting to know the other people who are on the journey with you, as well as the unique wisdom keepers that you would be calling to you. Yeah, and so it's like Thursdays and Sundays, but not everyone. You'll see. If you look, you'll find the dates and you'll see how it works.
Okay. And if somebody's listening to this recording after those dates, so today's date is September 28th, 2020. If somebody's listening after that, will this course be available as a package they can purchase at your website?
Yeah, it's already available as a self-study. It just won't have all the live interactive components to it. And I just felt like people really appreciate being held through a process. So that's what I'm doing now. I don't know if I'll ever do it again because it's been a lot of work.
In demand.
But the self-study it will be available forever. And hopefully you can share a link that's Cindy's specific link, and then they can click on that one. That would be the best one to use.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been so nice to catch up with you.
So nice. So nice to catch up with you.
Yeah. And congratulations on all your risk-taking and success, and embracing the totality. Love you. Thank you all for tuning in. Love to you. Hope to see you in the course. I'm going to be joining you. So,
will you?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do live Thursdays. I'm committed to teaching online, but yeah,
we'll talk.
But I can.
With coffee talk.
Okay. All right, sweetie. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.